And before we move on, I also want to go ahead and show you guys the male flowers and female flowers on squash and cucumbers, so you know what to look out for when you're going to do your pollinating indoors. If you're outdoors, I still pollinate my squash in the early spring, or when my plants are young, and maybe even this time of year in the fall. We're moving into winter, the weather's turning very, very quickly on us. And the reason is, also with squash, it is best to plant more than one plant. If you have 2 or 3, you're going to have a better pollination rate and a better success at hand pollinating. And the reason is, when you start a squash plant, typically what happens is either all female flowers come out first, or all male flowers come out first, and then those die off, and then the opposite sex comes up, and all of those come up, and then those die off, and then eventually they go into sync, and you start to have male and female flowers growing at the same time, so you can start to do your pollinating. In the early spring, because I'm ahead of the season, I tend to beat the pollinators, and we don't have a ton of pollinators right when I put these towers outside, so I will just hand pollinate to increase my yields until those pollinators take off. In the summer, I don't even think about it. In the fall, I go back to doing a little hand pollinating as I watch the pollinators kind of drop off and disappear in our area. But planting 2 squash, and if you can plant them a couple of weeks apart, so get one going, wait 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about when to start your seeds in another video in the seed starting module. But then in a couple of weeks, get another one going, and what that'll do is give you flowers that are coming up kind of in an interval process. So your chances of having one that's got female and one that's got male increase 100% with 2 plants versus just having that one, and you won't be stuck as long. You may still get stuck for a moment in that waiting period before your plants go into sync together and you actually get the male and the female. With cucumbers, I don't see that. They come out pretty fast on the dwarf varieties anyway, and you'll get male and female flowers. The variety that doesn't require pollination, I have seen some people say they're supposed to be all female flowers that are able to self-pollinate, but a lot of times people will start that plant and just have a random event where they only get male flowers. Okay, and the rain came in, but I need to get this video for you guys because winter is coming and things are going to change fast. This is a cucumber plant, and here is your female flower. We can tell it's the female because we can actually see the fruit of the cucumber right there. Okay, and our male flower is right here. And our male flower looks different in that it doesn't have that fruit. The male flowers also tend to be in little clusters together. So you can see there's one there and there's another one budding near it. And that's the nature typically of the male flowers. But you can see no fruit on this one. But we have that little baby cucumber right here. And that's how you know the difference. Over here, here's a great example of a squash where it's only male flowers. This one's a young plant I got started, and here we have our male flower, and I can tell it's my male because it's just on a stem. So here we have our stem and then our flower. Here's another one. This is a better example here. We have a stem and a flower. Our female flowers are going to actually have the fruit on them. So if we come up here a little higher to my other squash, you will see here is one. This was a zucchini and this was the flower. So before, and hopefully this got pollinated, I'm not sure, but before this flower died, it looked like one of these big flowers, except for instead of this stem, it had the fruit on it already. So that is the difference. Here's one right here as well. And you can see that fruit. There's the fruit and there's the flower. If for some reason it doesn't get pollinated, what'll happen is this will rot. It'll start to rot back and die. You can harvest them before they do that. Once you notice it didn't get pollinated, and eat them as little baby squash. I do that often. Oh, here's a great example. There's our itty bitty squash. So cute. And our flower hasn't opened yet. And then here our flowers opened. So all we're gonna do is go over to one of our male flowers. And I'm gonna break it off. If you're doing this indoors, you can do it with a paintbrush. But for the sake of this video and only having one hand, I'm just gonna do it this way. So I ripped off the petals, and I don't know if you guys can see all that pollen in there. Gorgeous pollen, and I'm just gonna stick this part into the flower and move it around and get all of that pollen inside this flower. And so just to recap on this overview of indoor versus outdoors, be mindful of what you're growing when you're growing indoors, on how big it's going to get, how long it takes to mature, and how valuable it is to saving you money at the grocery store or filling a gap in your diet. If you can't buy it at the grocery store, that may mean it's worth using real estate, even if it takes longer. I do that for some herbs that I just can't buy at the grocery store, or some things like aloe that just save me a ton of money. If I can grow my own, it's worth the real estate. You can look up days to maturity. I like to stay under 65 days to maturity with plants grown indoors. Anything over that starts to feel like you are growing this plant forever and ever and ever and not ever gaining any benefit off of it. Of course, there are exceptions to that. So, you know, some things may say 75, 90 days to maturity, but that is fruiting in the process along the way. So that may change it. So you can do a little research into anything you want to grow and just look at what the plant looks like full maturity. How long does it take to actually produce fruit? How valuable is that to your diet? And is it worth the real estate on your tower? Now, the more towers you have, the less that's gonna matter. I can experiment and try all kinds of things because I have so many at this point. But because I won't grow on all of these in the winter, I will cut back a few of them and grow. When I'm growing in my garage, I will be more particular about what I'm growing over the winter for that reason. The other thing, when you're growing outdoors, if you wanna grow the traditional variety of green beans, that vine, and melons and cantaloupe and all of those things, you can totally do that. You can grow big plants like okra. I would like to experiment with corn. I have no idea if it'll work, but I think that'd be a fun experiment. Amaranth is a great grain you can grow. All of those can be grown, but be prepared to manage the vines somehow. Whether that's building a trellis system. I've seen people put these with a fence behind them and use the fence as a trailing system. That's an option. So you can get creative with how you set up trellising for those. And again, just look at the plant and the nature of it. If it's a bush, we can't grow it. If it's an herb that is going to be a bush before it fruits or has medicinal purposes, we can't grow it. A lot of herbs, the medicinal properties are in the roots. Dandelion's one of them, and you can grow dandelion greens on a tower, and they do great, and I love to grow those because they're so nutritious for juicing. But you don't want to let that root be in the system too long because it's a taproot. It's very heavy, very bulky. So that's one you're going to want to pull out and harvest it for the leaves, not for the medicinal properties of the root. That would classify as like a deep root vegetable, like a carrot or a potato. And have fun with it. Don't be afraid to try things. Just kind of do your research beforehand. And if there's something, like I am trying some new things this year. I have some lavender, and I've never done lavender before, and rosemary. And by nature, rosemary says it doesn't like to have its feet wet. So I didn't think it would grow in a tower, and it grows amazing in a tower, and I can't grow it in the garden. So it's definitely worth taking a risk every once in a while to try things. But for the majority of your tower, I recommend set it up with the things that you buy at the grocery store or that are important in your diet that you can't buy at the grocery store, and give yourself an abundance of food to eat, and then save a little portion to experiment and dive in and try some of those other things.